It's former US President Benjamin Franklin who said, "The only thing sure in life is death and taxes." And even though we can all try to avoid the tax man, the long arm of the Grim Reaper knows no boundaries. So what happens when you die? You get to choose. And today's featured guest is making it easy for you to secure your last wishes as we face an uncertain tomorrow by making planning for that future accessible and easy to do today. Let's talk legacy with Andre Robb of Will and Tomorrow. Andre Robb, do you feel like you were ever really entrepreneurial minded? Is that where you were at when you were small?
Yeah, I remember one of the first things I did was, like buying soda from the truck and making sure that I didn't have to buy the soda at the retail price from the school. And so I would be able to save most of my lunch money or more of my lunch money to be able to, just have more money. And then I remember one time too, at church, I made fans for the ladies at church because my church was hot and we never had AC at the time or anything like that. And I remember going to the scrapyard where the shavings from the wood would be, and just getting construction paper, gluing stuff together and selling the fans. Yeah, those are some of the earlier entrepreneurial pursuits that I can recall before I went to high school.
So tell me, how are people responding to that? Like maybe your parents or what?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pity sales.
Okay.
The church was hot, so there was a problem. So that's early penchant to identify problems and kind of come up with solutions has been with me, but certainly there weren't any high quality products, and that's something that you learn to be able to create over time.
Okay, so you were looking for ways to solve problems, to earn money very early out. Did you feel like you got any kind of training or an opportunity that kind of cemented that for you as you grew up or you went into high school?
I would say I started noticing that there were, people who created opportunities and those who were more or less utilizing those opportunities, right? So once I recognized that there are people who own businesses and they were the ones who got to allow their imagination to come to life in the form of services and products, I never really forgot that. And even though I did pursue a very traditional academic kind of a path, it's what I believe has led me to this point. This conviction that if you are brave enough to venture, to create an opportunity, then you might really enjoy it and you might make an indelible mark somewhere.
I mean, that's a huge lesson to learn as someone, so young, being able to spot that. Do you feel like when you were younger, it felt accessible to you? Like, did you feel like, yeah, I could become one of those people who could be a business owner?
Yeah, and this is a story I tell from time to time about the confidence that my parents instilled in me, particularly my mother. So I don't find it to be out of reach to be doing what I'm doing. I mean, I'm definitely not at the pinnacle of my career as yet, but I feel as though the path that we're on, the path that I'm taking, is definitely in line with the confidence that was instilled in me by my parents, to look for the opportunities, to use your imagination, to use your intelligence, to not be afraid of hard work, and to be a lifelong learner. So that the things that I'm not formally trained in, I will seek out that information and I will do the work of applying it and finding a way to convert knowledge into wisdom. Yeah?
Got you. One of my favorite questions to ask, and I love that you brought up the idea of lifelong learning. One of my favorite things to ask is, what did you study? Because I want to know if there is any correlation or any connection to what you decide to pursue when you're in school and when you're younger, and where it is that you decide to kind of venture into business. So you did economics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Economics.
I did economics, and actually I went to UWI today, and I walked past what they would call your old stomping grounds
Right.
over by SOSI. I was there in the mid 2000s, and it was around the time when the stories about the role of UWI in the region were still being rung in our ears, you know, as this place that's a collection of leaders from across the region, and that it's not necessarily just to read for the degree and get all these great grades, but to have relationships with people who themselves will be in positions of power in a couple years' time. So my time doing economics was a lot of being involved in university life, in understanding what it was like to, you know, own yourself as a young adult. I went to UWI at 17, and I remember feeling lost living on Chancellor Hall, but over time I was integrated and I found a space that was mine. And I think all of these things kind of added to the confidence that it requires to, you know, be creating an entire business, an entire system that you hope will have real impact.
So it sounds to me like that preaching, or that message that UWI rang in your ears from early out, it encouraged you along the path, but it went beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Because I understand that you went away, you can tell us where, right, to get into the more social development aspect of things, and research, again, another very heavily academic kind of space. How was that for you? What was that experience like in crafting where you are today, and what your entrepreneurial experience has been like?
I don't know that I would have started the first, was it the first business or one of the businesses that I started if I hadn't gone to South Africa to start field work for postgraduate studies. It was there that I would have had a different kind of exposure to the reality of families that are not financially capable of taking care of their needs. It was there that I recognized the role that development partners and the government play in terms of making sure that basic health care is accessible, and that families that are at a disproportionate disadvantage also have support. How does that tie into where I am? It's almost like I recognized that the structure around aid and providing cash grants and incentives for families was something that, coming from an economics background, there is a rationale for it, but the sustainability of that kind of approach I had real questions about. I also had questions about the level of empowerment that it really provided to these families. There were a lot of hoops that people had to jump through. There were cases where if one member of your family started earning a little bit more than the threshold, then it would disqualify you from getting the government support. But at the same time, what the family member is earning is not enough to elevate the standard of living. So people used to not have both parents in the household just so they could meet a requirement on paper. Seeing that up front kind of really rested in my spirit that economic empowerment through enterprise was one of the ways that I would want to see more families, especially communities of color, to be empowered. And I feel as though that was something that really said to me, hey, you know, this is something that you may want to reconsider, this academic path, reconsider it and see if there is something else that you can do with what you've been learning. And when I came back from South Africa, I started Brata Box & Co.
I want to get into that, to hear about that. Everything that screams social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, which is not one of the first recognized approaches to entrepreneurship, but definitely I think would you say it's viable and something that people should consider, the idea of sustainable business?
Definitely. You know, there are two, more than two, but at least two that I'll explain now. Two ways to think about it. There is a person who is the overt social entrepreneur. It's in all of their branding. It's a big part of the front-facing story. And you make sure that all the elements of your business model are aligned with what it means to be a social entrepreneur. And then I feel as though I'm more in the bucket of people who allow social entrepreneur to be kind of like an ethos or a guiding moment. Because I don't, outside of like a conversation here where it is a useful framework, I wouldn't necessarily go around and say that I'm a social entrepreneur, because the foundation is we are using the market, the free market, to create value for others and to get a return, you know, for that value. And that the return that we get, it's up to us how we want to use it. And so the ethos that I'm guided by, which puts me into the second bucket of the kind of social entrepreneur that isn't in your face with the branding, but definitely it's in my heart, is the one that says that whatever business or commercial venture I'm involved with, it has to have the well-being of the community at the center. And the way that we organize the business model cannot be exploitative to any factor that we impact. So whether it's the environment, whether it's people's personal lives, all the different areas that we want to have an impact, we cannot exploit people as we are pursuing making money.
So what would you say to the person who says, listen, at the end of the day, it is about maximizing profit?
I'd say look at where we are. Look at what's happening where capitalism is causing the moment that we had with the pandemic where people got to stay home and now they're telling everybody to go back out. We're seeing where people are recognizing, hey, I have a choice in this matter. I do not want to be on the hamster wheel 24/7, and I am going to either leave your company or you're going to do something about your system. Right. You know, the great resignation is a term that is being touted in different discussions, because that maximizing profit at the expense of the employee, at the expense of the community that you serve, is not yielding the kind of sustainable results that on paper it is meant to yield. So it's very clear to me that we need a different model, and social entrepreneurship, once it is applied within your reality, is a viable model as far as I'm concerned.
So we've heard a little bit about Box and the inspiration that came from being in the heart of things in South Africa. What's on your shirt is Will and Tomorrow, so we're not quite focusing on Box today. Can you kind of tell me how is it that, or why is it you made that transition, if you consider it a transition, because we know that Box is operating in the back end, just not super retail focused at the moment. Tell us, what was that inspiration to kind of transition into Will and Tomorrow?
All right, so I'll tell you a couple of things. One is my father is a craftsman, which means that I grew up around someone who supported his family by using his hands to make things. So we're talking about wicker baskets, different furniture, even using thatch, because I'm from Galena, which is a coastal town in St. Mary. And on the seaside, we would have these small palms that we call thatch, and you could cut them, sun them, and they use them to make brooms, right? And then if you weave them, you can get like your mats and hats and different decorative things. So Daddy would be doing that. He has a workshop next to the house, and we would see and we would participate in that. And so Box kind of came out of recognizing that people who use their hands, artisans, people who survive by putting their craftsmanship into the world and thrive were sometimes at the mercy of the person who was negotiating prices and determining their payment cycles. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to, one, source a lot of really well-made Jamaican products and allow them to be seen by people who were willing to pay the price that we determined so that they could make more money from their art. So that's the connection between my upbringing, Brata box. Now bring us over to Will and Tomorrow, which is not a physical product in the traditional sense.
Correct.
I really was just I was over all of the physical, packing, shipping, logistical elements of making gift boxes. It eats up a lot of the revenue that you bring in from the sale, and it also is subject to a lot of external factors. So, you know, around Christmas time, people would want to buy more, but as a smaller player, you really don't get the kind of priority from, you know, from the shippers. And so sometimes you have unexpected delays. And just more and more of that just meant, okay, I want to put something out that didn't necessarily rely on moving parts. And so we went to a different business model, software as a service, using an online tool and using that, you know, modernizing a very important document so that we would, you know, be able to make money and also give people a very useful tool.
So I was hoping for a story about you fell off of something and you're like, oh no, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. Okay, well, obviously not, that's not what happened. But before we get into kind of your motivation and your inspiration, because it sounds like it was a logical, oh my God, I need a break, let me explore something else. Tell us what Will and Tomorrow is. For somebody who doesn't know anything about Will and Tomorrow, what do I need to know?
So Will and Tomorrow, we think about the future. We think about families and how people want to show their love to their family members by making sure that there is as little headache at the point where someone is no longer around, they have died, to when their family needs to make use of their assets. So right now, our main tool for doing that is through helping people to make their wills. However, there are other things that we are thinking about and we're working on in the background that's related to that particular topic of making sure that many more Jamaicans, many more people across the Caribbean, many more people across the world are thinking about how they show love to their families by making plans now.
I love that. I love thinking of it that way because normally when somebody mentions will to you, I kind of, you know, it feels a little macabre almost. Like I'm thinking about walking out and getting
hit by a car
or something like that. And I feel like it's something that's difficult for people to think about. Have you found that to be the case?
You're a marketer, you know that it's all about storytelling, and people are sometimes very difficult to convince.
Yes.
This is such a, you know, this is a good kind of challenge as far as getting the customers to recognize that we're not selling them a pill, we're selling them something that is useful. So you're right, it definitely has its, you know, like the ups, you know, the rough side of the mountain to go up. But we believe in the value, we believe in the benefit, and as we get more resources to be able to tell the story on a grander scale, then we know that more people will join us.
I agree. I'm gonna think about it that way. It's how do I want to smooth the process if I was to go to see the Lord?
Yeah, and I mean, so you asked about a story.
Right.
Yeah, it's a matter of eventuality.
Correct.
So you asked for a story as to, you know, what was the clincher between, you know, working on Brata Box and.
I mean, you could come up with something else to digitize, some other record or some other thing that people need, but I feel like a will is such a very personal thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that people don't think about that much, but when it's necessary or when it's not thought about, the heartache that it leaves in the wayside, like it's major. So I mean, how did you get to a will?
Well, I had the unfortunate experience of recognizing that, hey, something could happen to me and I could no longer be with my family.
Yeah.
So when that happened and I survived and I'm fine and I'm living to continue to contribute to the world, I had some time to stop and to recognize that the few bank accounts that I was saving my money in, the assets that I own that have titles, you know, I was the only one on them. and just some more research pointed me to the fact that it would have taken a longer time for my family to be able to access these things because I didn't have a will at the time.
Right.
So that was all I needed. All I needed was something to make me say pause. Life is fickle. Anything can go awry with your health. And once I had that personal experience, I stopped, took a look at things, and then I said, hey, I need to create something to make it easier for young people to think about making a will, and for those who would already be thinking about it to have cheaper access to it.
So a lot of people, when they think will, I think lawyer, right?
Yeah.
In the Jamaican context, is what I'm creating with you legally binding?
Yes, I love that question, because on our team we have an attorney, and the role of the attorney is to make sure that what people would have gotten if they had directly contacted someone like an attorney to do their will for them, they will still get it with our platform. However, the way that our law is set up, it says that you don't need the lawyer to actually sign anything. It doesn't have to be created by an attorney in order for it to be legally valid. So what we've done is we've actually used the attorney to make the will. We've actually created a way for you to understand who should be your witnesses, where you should sign, all of that stuff. And we've made the part that you give us, the answers that go into your document, very easy for you to provide. And all of those things come together so that the printed paper that you get is the legally binding will that will do all the things that you've included in it for it to do.
Okay, excellent. So the moment I'm done with that process, I know that I'm secure.
Yeah, you just need to put it up safely. Tell your family member where to find it, if you're, or the executor that you've appointed. Let them know that it's with your passport, it's with your birth certificate, and then when the time comes, they'll just, take a read and be guided by it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the product works, and it works with our market. What has the feedback been like, nutshell? How have people responded to it?
The early responders have been like out the gate, very enthusiastic, and we expect that, There are people who, even before the product was live, they're like, they need to be our customers. What we are finding now in terms of keeping a steady flow is that we need to educate people. People hear about it at first and they think it's a good idea, but they're not, for some reason, they're taking their own sweet time to, close the deal. And so we are actually in the growing pains of understanding how to shorten the cycle between product introduction to actually a sale. But that's something that, as we run more experiments inside of our business, we're getting a better handle of how that looks.
All right, so let's think about the future. I have seen where is it pronounced Y-L-A-I, Yali?
Wiley.
Wiley?
Yeah.
Okay. You are, or have been a part of a Wiley fellowship, and Will and Tomorrow was formed in the midst of our favorite thing for the past 2 years and counting. How do you think that some of the networking and the interactions, because when we started off, you said you were talking how important it is for community to support. How do you think that the community that you have created and you're a part of have impacted your entrepreneurship journey?
So I am standing on the shoulders of a lot of people that have invested in my education, not just formally, but we're talking about providing skills along the way, exposure and opportunities. In fact, right now, because of YLI, which is a program from the U.S. Department of Education, they provide an opportunity for you to learn from other organizations based in the United States that are similar to the one that you're building as a young leader. And through that kind of partnership, you get mentorship and you get education around business practices, etc. So YLI is allowing me right now to be part of an accelerator program where Will and Tomorrow is being looked at by professionals, like the most amazing sessions that I have every other week are these sessions with the financial analyst That's walking me through some models as to if we were to go with this next market, this is what we could anticipate, or if we were to add this next product, this is what we could anticipate. So there has been just a wealth of resources and opportunities that I've been blessed by because of agencies like Wiley and even the Jamaica Business Development Corporation and other kinds of fora that I've sought out. And in terms of network, you know, you can't overemphasize the importance that knowing people will have on how far you get. I spoke to how Yui really taught me that my contemporaries are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And they already are, and we're already, you know, in that kind of a vein. And it's the same with like Wiley. Those who were part of my cohort and the cohorts afterwards are people who are at the top of their games in their respective countries. So now it's just a matter of a WhatsApp call or a message away to be able to find out something about something going on in a Caribbean country that we want to expand to, and to be able to get some connections to potential partners. So that's what those opportunities do. They allow your network to be broad, and for the number of people that you need to talk to in order to get something done, for that to be a lot shorter.
Got you. So you talked about expansion, you talked about what's next, addition of products. So what's next for Will and Tomorrow? What's next for Andre?
Yeah, so for me, I am just looking to get Will and Tomorrow to be the kind of business that really inspires other entrepreneurs as they come up. You know, starting this kind of business from Jamaica is something that requires a lot of work, but it's something that we are committed to. You know, me and my little team, they are the superstars behind us. So that's one thing, making sure that we stick to it. We do think that there is huge potential for us to not only impact our region, but to have an international business. And so what's next is to grow from strength to strength, to continue to refine the product, to add different product lines, to also go into spaces related to estate planning and inheritance, and think about communities of color, communities that have historically been disadvantaged, and kind of rewrite the narrative around what it means to take care of your family, and to make sure that intergenerational wealth is not just something that is reserved for the super elite, but that even me with my 2 bank accounts, I can leave it to my 3 nieces and my nephew, and you know, contribute to their education at some future point.
Talk about an inspirational goal, like that to me is screaming legacy. It's screaming, you know,
favorite word of mine, legacy. Yeah.
And building on the shoulders of giants. So if you were to have somebody build on your shoulders, on what you have learned, what is that one key thing that you'd want to communicate to somebody, either starting, coming up? Like, what do they need? What's that thing that you'd want them to know?
It would have to do with what's going on inside of you. You know, figure that out. Figure out who you are, what makes you peaceful, happy, transcendent. If that is a relationship with your God, then do not think that you have to separate that part of you from your business pursuits. It's when you are an integrated person, someone who allows for vulnerability in all aspects of your life, that's when you might end up finding the thing that will be the game changer in terms of a business to pursue. So the one thing I would suggest is that spend time getting to know yourself, spend time tapping into your source of strength, and be willing to listen to the guidance that provides, and know that once you are brave and once you are true, you can do really amazing things. And even if they're only amazing to you, then that's perfectly fine.
Valid as well. All right. So there's so many lessons and so many inspirational points that we can take away from Andre Robb of Will and Tomorrow. But I think what sticks with me is that call for you to search self in order to find that strength that you need to take whatever that step is, whether it is starting, whether it is the next step. But whatever it is that you do, stay true and just start.